Here's the story of the girl who was stuck in between of where she was and where she is. She never felt seen. Too Indian for foreign lands, too foreign for her hometown, too white for her people, and for all others too brown. We build borders and not bridges. Broken pieces we divide her. Pry apart the parts of NRI that were stuck inside her. And when the people who looked like her were the ones that sat beside her, that was the moment more than ever. She felt like an outsider. Her language sat awkwardly on the tongue that was her own. She was an alien and intruder inside her own home. Her life was a puzzle, and now this I admit that all the pieces were there, but none of them seemed to fit. It was like tug of war, but neither side wanted to win. The prize that was her, the prize for thick skin, is no sense of belonging, a part of two worlds apart. If home is where the heart is, where is my heart? At the age of 12, my family and I moved to India from Dubai. I was a very insecure preteen, and leaving behind my friends, my school, and literally everything did not exactly help my situation. I was filled with mixed feelings because while on one hand I had to leave my entire life behind, on the other hand I had a chance to rediscover my roots. But being the new kid has never been easy. My father was caught up in work and constant traveling, while my mother was busy trying to get us all settled into this whole new life we had in front of us. My classmates weren't exactly welcoming either. I, like millions of kids all over the world, felt like I had no one to turn to. My family moved to India so we could be closer to home, but I felt more alienated than ever. I was lonely and incredibly bored. So just to take up my time, I began trying out different hobbies. Art wasn't really my thing. Neither was I an athlete. And let's just say I'm better off listening to music than making it. So I picked up the pen, wrote down my thoughts, and eventually they became poetry. For the first time, I felt like I was good at something. I was actually enjoying myself. I realized this was the beginning of something beautiful, so I kept writing. My parents were proud of my work, but they were my parents after all, and so their opinions came from a place of my well-being rather than a critical commentary of my poetry. So we made social media accounts and began posting my poetry there, gaining a following along the way. I also began performing at open mics and other poetry events. The conversations I had with different people on these forums led me to witness the effect that my work had on everyone that connected with my poetry. This is what inspired me to write for others. My followers would tell me these incredible, inspiring, and sometimes absolutely heartbreaking stories, and I would weave them into my poetry. A personal favorite is when a certain follower, a middle-aged woman, asked me to write a poem on missing someone. I asked her to share a few details with me if she was comfortable with it. Turns out, she lost her daughter to leukemia a year before that conversation. I was broken when she told me this. The very least I could do to honor her was write a poem. And so I wrote what I consider my best work yet, because it comforted a distorted mother. It goes, "They say the smallest of the small graves are the purest of the pure. And though all my time was spent on you, I wish I had spent a little bit more." And it's true that hard times come and go, and what may seem a curse be a boon. And people too come and go. But did you have to go so soon? This only pushed me to write more. Poem after poem began piling up, and so writing a book was inevitable. My parents and I decided upon self-publishing. We discussed our options for publishing houses, after which began the great back and forth for prizes. We all settled for a price that seemed like a bit too much. So here's the thing. Our lives too had its shares of ups and downs. And when you're in your downs, it's important to make the right decisions. Considering the situation we were in back then, this amount was too much for us. I was ready to delay my ambitions and put common sense first, though it broke my heart to do so. I sank down into the sofa. My parents were willing to pay, but I couldn't bring myself to ask them. My father understood my situation well without words. He put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "I will not find the money. You will." I soon understood what he meant. Sponsors. If I just prove myself worthy enough to someone, some company, or some organization, they would be more than happy to fund my book. To me, this was perfect. And so I mailed every organization and company that came to my mind. And trust me when I say there were a lot. I spent hours and hours on research work. Not getting a mail back was a thing of the norm for me. I also had to cope up with negative responses. But I did not stop. I was in too deep to turn back now. It was also around this time that people found out about the work I've been doing. And they spared no expense in shooting my ambitions down. But I couldn't care less, because when your back is on the ground, the sky seems much clearer. Now it's much easier to sell yourself in person, so I put some special attention to a target very likely to sponsor me: my school. I flooded their email inboxes and showed up at the admin's office more than I should have. At the end, they had to see me. The principal was extremely encouraging and the school agreed to support me. Now I was on my way to becoming a published author. But I was not ready for what came next. Because now I encountered the hardest part in the process of writing a book. Writing the book. The thing is, apart from being a writer, I'm also a student. And if these series of events had taken place literally any other time, it would have been much more convenient to me. But all of this happened right during my midterms. So this meant I had to study hard, but also write a book from scratch. I had to turn in the manuscript before the deadline, but also turn in my math homework the next day. Reality check struck me. I was sleeping at 2 a.m. and waking up at 5:30. I was and missing assignments. I was zoning out at inconvenient times, like in the middle of a phone call with my editor, or right when my teacher was inquiring about my delayed homework. Looking back now, I really cherish this time because it showed me my strengths I never knew existed, I never knew I needed, and my friends I never knew I had. Was it healthy? Absolutely not. But did it work out? Surprisingly so. For a star to be born, I've been told, gaseous nebulas must explode. Destruction at its finest in the cold, miles away from the earth. So crash and crumble, my dear friend. Break down and break up, collapse and bend. But remember, this is not your end. It is your birth. Because after 2 months of pure hustle, on 29th November 2019, my dream became a reality. My book, Ink on Paper, was launched into the world. And that is how I, a social outcast, became a published author, making meaningful relationships along the way. That is how I picked up the pen and never put it down again. It started like all great things with a change, be it getting a new job, picking up a new hobby, or even moving to another country. Time after time, I found myself at rock bottom. But the beauty of rock bottom is that while you're there, the only place you can go is up. I started this talk with poem, and I'd like to end it with one too. So here is December. Till my last public sighting, I shall sit here and keep writing until something more inviting shall present itself in view. Till my fingers bleed, I keep biting. My little nails for life is frightening, yet it's death we keep on fighting. It's curiously obscure. Till every last ounce of pity has given itself up to my city where I was born. It isn't pretty, not a place I would explore. is around there to save some from. What is home? The place you come from, if not the first place you learn to run from. I've seen it all before. Till my lips turn blue, nothing can keep me from you, and I would like to ask who could be so naive to stand and cry near a grave. The flowers every week cannot save, what is dead now can't forgive. You didn't care when they were alive. Here's something I should have spoken. My pieces may be broken, but if you put them together, you can make something complete out of it. Upon my very first breath, I made a pact with death, and I've spent my entire life trying to cheat out of it. In the bleak of July, we ended without a goodbye. I say this, but a reply I don't expect. Now I say this in December. Amidst every coal's dying ember, you are someone I don't remember, but won't forget. Thank you.